Welcome to TV Africa News. Thank you so much for joining us and Norris being part of us. This is Africa Today. My name is Sahaba Kajura, but first are the headlines. Pinet signed deal as witness, not investor. Earning 100 million shillings monthly salary, but without a side hustle cannot make you rich. CAS says Entebbe Airport runway reopened after Rand airplane is removed. In our sports today, Uganda Cranes to start AFCON 2023 qualifiers away to Algeria. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. We start with one of our top stories. Now, as local processors continue to debate the controversial coffee agreement that has caused public uproar, available information shows that Enrica Pinet, the foreign investor behind Uganda Vicky Coffee Company, signed the deal as a witness. We have the report.
A leaked February 2022 Memorandum of Understanding shows that the deal was signed by Finance Minister Matia Kasaija on behalf of government in the presence of Ramadan Gobi, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance. According to the Memorandum of Understanding, Uganda Vicky Coffee Company is a limited liability company that is fully registered with its office at Plot 2, Summit View, Kololo in Kampala. According to the document, the coffee processing facility will have a capacity of 60,000 tonnes per annum, which has brought up the controversy that the Memorandum of Understanding indicates that Uganda Vicky Coffee Company was granted exclusivity to buy all Uganda's coffee even before the government can look at other players. It states that Government of Uganda undertakes that it will take all reasonable measures to give priority of supply of coffee to the company before registering any contract or acknowledging any arrangement for the export of coffee beans. The deal with Uganda Vicky Coffee Company will be valid until 2032 if the operations are to kick off this year 2022. In all its operation timeline, Uganda Vicky Coffee Company will not have to pay any tax according to the agreement. The agreement also reveals that Uganda Vicky Coffee Company will receive an electricity subsidy so that the price they pay for electricity at the plant does not exceed 5 cents per unit.
Moving on, the State Minister in charge of microfinance, Haruna Cheyune Kasolo, has asked monthly salary earners to start side businesses that bring in income on a daily basis. We have the report.
Speaking to the beneficiaries in Kasese as he continues to monitor the performance of a Myoga program in Rwenzori region, Haruna Kasolo said it is high time Ugandans embrace the saving culture, but noted salary earners ought to think outside the box. Minister Kasolo explained that by starting side daily income businesses, salary earners can ably benefit from a Myoga program when they join circles that are within their businesses. He said this not only helps them to save, but also to get cheap credit from their own circles to inject in their businesses. The minister, however, emphasized the idea of saving, challenging the people to always save first before spending money earned. He said money saved benefits more people than one spent on leisure and pleasure. According to Kasolo, saving can enable them get cheap credit from Myoga circles and avoid the banks and money lenders that he described as loan sharks who are ready to eat them up.
Moving on, in our top stories, the Uganda Civil Aviation Authority has said the situation has returned to normal after a Rand airplane had been removed from the runway. Now, on Wednesday morning, a Rand airplane skidded off the runway at Entebbe Airport as it landed. Take a look at the details.
The Rwanda Air Flight RWD 464 that was flying from Nairobi overshot the runway at Entebbe Airport as it landed. This saw chaos as several travelers were stranded at the airport as many of the flights were either delayed or cancelled. Whereas the airport has two runways, including the main one 17/35 which is 3.6 kilometers and the alternate one 12/30 which is 2.3 kilometers and mainly accommodates small and lighter aircraft. It was the main one that had been affected by the Rwanda Air aircraft, and this meant aircraft could not use it. Earlier, the Civil Aviation Authority had reported that flights had been cleared to resume, but later it was reported that the runway was again closed due to an unseen challenge. They explained that during the process of removal of the aircraft from the runway strip, it got stuck closer to the runway and this could not allow other aircraft to use the runway. Consequently, the previous clearance was reviewed. However, in the last statement, the aviation body in Uganda says business has resumed after all the mess was cleared.
Well, thank you so much, reporter. We take a quick break. We shall come back with the international news. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. In international news, Karine Kanimba, the adopted daughter of imprisoned Rwandan opposition figure Paul, called on President Paul Kagame on Wednesday to release her father, saying his fate was in his hands. We have the report.
During a press conference in Brussels, Karine Kanimba, the daughter of Paul Rusesabagina, called upon President Kagame to look into his heart for that space and free her father. At the end of a trial in 2021 that Belgium considered neither fair nor equitable, Paul Rusesabagina was sentenced to 25 years in prison for founding and belonging to the National Liberation Front, an armed group accused of carrying out deadly attacks in Rwanda in 2018 and 2019. According to his relatives, Paul Rusesabagina, whose 25-year prison sentence for terrorism was confirmed on appeal on April 4th, suffered a stroke in prison a few weeks ago, for which no reliable diagnosis has been made. In addition, he suffers from severe pain in one of his arms, leading to fears of a cardiac arrest, according to his daughter. A staunch opponent of Paul Kagame for over 20 years, Paul Rusesabagina was made famous by the film Hotel Rwanda, released in 2004. This feature film tells the story of how his moderate Hutu, who ran the Hotel Mill Collins in Kigali, saved more than 1,000 people during the 1994 genocide, during which 800,000 people were killed, according to the UN, mainly from the Tutsi minority. Mr. Rusesabagina had been living in exile in the United States and Belgium since 1996, before being arrested in Kigali in August 2020 under market circumstances as he got off a plane he thought was bound for Burundi.
Away from that, an independent autopsy confirms that Patrick Lyoya was shot in the back of the head by a Michigan police officer while face down on the ground, according to lawyers for the black man's family.
The finding of a former Detroit area medical examiner matches what was seen last week on video released by the Grand Rapids police chief. The official autopsy report hasn't been released to the public. Dr. Warner Spittis, holding a skull at a news conference to show where the bullet entered the head, said that there never will be a question that this was a typical entrance bullet wound. Spittis said he believes the gun was pressed against Lyoya's head when the officer fired. Lyoya was killed after a traffic stop in western Michigan on April 4th. He and the white officer physically struggled on the ground before the 26-year-old refugee from Congo was shot. Lyoya wasn't armed. The officer was on top of him and can be heard on video demanding that he takes his hand off a police taser. Attorney Ben Crump, who has secured multi-million-dollar settlements for families of other black men killed by police, said that can confirm that Patrick Lyoya was shot in the back of his head and is worth the scientific evidence of the tragic killing and what his family believes was an execution. Spittis said he performed the autopsy last weekend at a Grand Rapids funeral home. The 95-year-old forensic pathologist participated in the assassination investigations of President John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr., among other high-profile cases. Lyoya's death has outraged his family, as well as many people who have watched video of the confrontation with an officer.
Moving on in international news, Google has chosen Nairobi for its first product development center on the continent. Now, the announcement was made nearly 7 months after the tech giant revealed a $1 billion investment plan in various projects in Africa over the next 5 years. We have the report.
The American company said it will hire more than 100 tech experts, including software engineers, researchers, and designers in the next 2 years to help solve any difficult and technical challenges. Google had already opened an artificial intelligence center in Ghana's capital, Accra, in 2019. Its managing director for the sub-Saharan African region, Netin Gajera, predicted that by the end of this decade, 800 million people will be using internet on the continent. Last month, Microsoft, another American tech giant, opened a new African research and development center in the Kenyan capital.
Away from that, troops have been deployed to support rescue operations since massive floods hit South Africa more than a week ago. Now, the Defense Force announced on Monday that it was deploying 10,000 troops to help clear debris, rebuild fallen bridges, provide clean water, and reconnect severed power lines. Following up a declaration of a national state of disaster, President Cyril Ramaphosa dispatched top ministers to the city of Durban and KwaZulu-Natal province, where at least 448 people have now died and 40,000 are homeless. The country has declared a national state of disaster after record rains flooded swathes of KwaZulu-Natal and Eastern Cape provinces. The Defense Force announced on Monday that it was deploying 10,000 troops to help clear debris, rebuild fallen bridges, provide clean water and reconnect severed power lines. But in Kwandegezi on Wednesday, no help came as more than a half dozen men struggled to a mud-covered road. Many local people say they remain deeply nervous, still scared by the sight of roads that became rivers and bore away lives, homes and possessions. Wielding shovels, mallets and machetes, they worked for 4 hours to try to shift the muddy debris, hoping that vehicles could at last get through. Well, thank you so much, reporter. Africa Today takes a quick break. We shall come back with business, health and sports. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching TV Africa, the right to know. In a business news today, last December, Congolese rumba was added to UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity list, sparking hopes for Democratic Republic of Congo, where this musical genre is very important. We have the report.
The addition of Congolese rumba to UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity list's economic impact was very much discussed at the first edition of the International Rumba Festival, organized by the French Institute of Pointe-Noire in the Republic of Congo, in the presence of rumba actors from the two Congos and those from the diaspora. Sylvie Bayon, managing director of the French Institute in Pointe-Noire, said that a country that develops its culture is destined to develop tourism, attract curiosity and therefore develop an economy. She added that giving them the infrastructure and the necessary spaces to be able to showcase their talents can only bring economic added value to their countries at some point. Rumba could play its part in the new economic models of the countries concerned, models based on the diversity of economic fabric. However, some musicians have difficulty making a living from their art, accusing the poor distribution of copyright and plundering of their works. Revenues from the music industry in sub-Saharan Africa grew by 9.6% in 2021, according to the IFPI, the organization that represents the recorded music industry worldwide.
In our health news today, a senior official at the Ministry of Health has been fined 22.5 million shillings on top of the demotion after being found guilty of using one of the government COVID response vehicles for his personal ends. James Tukahira, a senior assistant secretary or transport officer, used two Ministry of Health COVID response vehicles to ferry building materials to his private sites in Kazo, Chegegwa, Kampala and Tungamo districts until they were seized by the IGG on December 14, 2021, becoming the first person to be convicted under the new leadership code tribunal headed by Dr. Roslyn Segawa and prosecuted by IGG. Tukahirwa pleaded guilty to the charges. Earlier, the Ministry of Health senior official had pleaded guilty to the charges after telling the tribunal that he thought the vehicles were part of the ministry's welfare scheme. This was corroborated by statements of several drivers under Tukahirwa, who said he always used the vehicles on a number of times. The tribunal, however, blasted the Ministry of Health for having weak internal systems that could not deter this abuse of office. The tribunal therefore directed that 22.5 million shillings be deposited to the Inspectorate of Government's Asset Recovery account with Bank of Uganda, whereas the senior official's demotion be done immediately. In a sports news today, Confederation of African Football has released the fixtures and dates for the 2023 African Cup of Nations qualifiers. This comes after the draw of the group stage were held on Tuesday in South Africa. Now, Uganda Cranes is pitted in Group F alongside Algeria, Niger, and neighbors Tanzania. In the fixtures released, the qualification games will be played between 30th May 2022 and 28th March 2023. It should be noted that the 6 groups games will be staged in 3 windows, with each team playing 2 games every window. Uganda will open its campaign on the road of Algeria before hosting Niger on March Day 2. These games will be played between 30th May 14th to 14th June 2022. The Cranes will then have a double-header against rivals Tanzania, with the former hosting the first leg before traveling to Dar es Salaam for match day 4. The 2 games against Tanzania will be played between 19th to 27th September 2022. The final window will come between 20th to 28th March 2023, with Uganda hosting Algeria first before facing Niger in Niamey on the final day. However, there are still concerns about where government will host its games, with reports indicating St. Mary's Stadium Chitende may not pass the CAF standards to host the qualifiers. Mandela National Stadium is still under renovation, and thus Uganda may be forced to look for another alternative home venue beyond its borders. Cote d'Ivoire will host the 2023 African Cup of Nations between June and July next year. Well, thank you so much for being a loyal audience from where we started from. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We shall keep updating you. It is TV Africa, the right to know.